You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Inside the Fox 59 CBS 4 podcast studio, welcome to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast. On this week 18 in the NFL, we have made it to the finish, mercifully so, alongside Joe Hopkins and Mike Chappell. I'm Dave Griffiths. Appreciate you all joining us. We will, of course, discuss the Colts season finale against the Texans. Well, I guess we are contractually obligated to do so at this point in the year. I'm sure that we'll discuss injuries as usual, keys to the game as usual. I'm sure Joe put in some ample thought to his keys to the game this week. Very excited to see what he has to say about the keys for the Colts and the Texans. And we'll make predictions, of course, as per usual. So I'll steal Mike's prediction in a minute here so I can have it by the end of the show. But first, let's get with the news. And it is significant this week across the NFL with the temporary postponement, perhaps eventually a cancellation, of the Monday Night Football game in Cincinnati between the Bengals and the Bills after a first quarter hit rendered Damar Hamlin motionless on the field there in Cincinnati. Second-year safety is Hamlin. Received a hit as he was tackling T. Higgins on a pass over the middle. And then got up and crumbled to the turf. Immediately, medical personnel out there on him, performing CPR, reaching down into death and bringing him back. And he's been at UC Medical Center in Cincinnati since. And fortunately, there's been wonderful news on Hamlin's condition, especially in the last couple minutes, really, before we tape this podcast, with doctors giving a press conference about the progress that he has made, about how he has regained consciousness, how he's gripping hands of family members. I saw that he can't communicate verbally yet, but through text asked who won the game. So that's so many encouraging signs right now about the condition of Damar Hamlin, chap. It is clearly something that has taken over the NFL news cycle over the past 48 hours, and much deservedly so.
You know, you're watching the game, you see the play, and it was just a play. I mean, like Zaire Franklin said, he said, that's a routine tackle. And to take it a step further, we've seen players make a tackle, get up, and go down. I mean, we've seen that many times. I don't think that's an overstatement. But it didn't take long to realize this was different. And what we've talked in the media room, what I've always learned to do is, one, you watch the response of the medical people, and they ran on the field. And then you watch the reaction of players. They will tell you if this is just another bad injury where guys suffered a torn whatever, or if this is dire. And it was very obvious to me at a very quick time that this was different, and and the longer it went, the more you knew it was bad. I mean, you see players on a knee consoling each other, crying. That's not normal. It's just I couldn't compare it to anything I've seen. You know, the worst thing I can remember seeing really in real time was Austin Collie against Philadelphia, where it was just awful. But he was up and in the locker room after the game. This was different, and what you just read is extremely encouraging. That some news places had some specialists on Tuesday, and they said the first 24, 48, 72 hours were going to be so critical in what you saw. So this is encouraging, and prayers remain to him, because I'm sure he's not out of the woods. But from when you revive a guy on the field, when he was gone, and they revive him, and apparently they may have had to revive him again at the hospital, to now, it's just a blessing. And this is the path that you had hoped that Damar would be on.
Of course, plenty of Colts speaking about it this week. Coach Jeff Saturday, Joe, calling it as scary situations he's ever seen. I mean, we've watched a lot of football in our lives just as football fans and football journalists. Jeff Saturday has seen that plus so much more himself. So were you watching the game on Monday Night Football? What was your reaction when I'm sure you were brought up to date if you weren't watching it at that very moment?
Yeah, the wife and I were watching it live, and you know, kind of as Mike explained, after a minute or two, you realized it was something different. And I remember just saying, did we just watch someone die on the football field? This is crazy. They brought out the ambulance, which is not normal for an NFL game. You'll see that sometimes in high school and stuff like that. But it was abundantly clear that this is just a freak thing that has not really happened in the NFL, at least not recently that I can remember. This was just wild. I'm very thankful for the recent updates that he's making great progress, that the doctors say he appears to be neurologically intact. Lungs are continuing to heal, so I'm sure he's got a long journey ahead of him. But thankfully, it seems like we're getting a lot of very encouraging news.
Our prayers still with him, with his family, our thoughts as well. And so all the best to Damar Hamlin as he continues on this journey then to rest, to rehab, to recover. And speaking with one player in particular in the Colts locker room who is certainly more affected than the situation than others is rookie safety Rodney Thomas. Thomas was a teammate of Damar Hamlin in high school. So they spent several years together. Hamlin was a year in front of him at Central Catholic outside of Pittsburgh, a factory powerhouse football program there in Western Pennsylvania. But those two share a unique bond. Speaking with Rodney, he said he still speaks with Damar Hamlin every day, even now that they've been graduated and long gone and separated from one another from several years of college and the NFL. Chap?
They talked Monday.
Yep.
Before the game.
Yep, he said he spoke with him right then on Monday, right even that day. So, and Rodney also drove down on Tuesday to Cincinnati to be with the family, to see them, and to get in the. He said he got in the hospital room, was able to see Damar there. He wasn't awake at that time, but he was able to be there, talk to him, hold his hand. Just really he called it an encouragement just to be able to be there to see his family. And even at that time, the news wasn't as good as it is now, but they were seeing early signs of progress at that point. So Rodney told us when he came back to Indy, that drive back was an encouraging drive. It wasn't a despondent drive, driving away from your friend just at the mercy of Lord knows what at that time. He felt that there were good things happening. So Rodney was great in front of us. He certainly was very forthcoming, was very honest, I think, with everything that he could say and everything that he was able to say, and also was extraordinarily confident that Damar Hamlin was going to pull through. And at that time, I was thinking, okay, it's nice to be confident, but you never know. But now I think like 48 or 24 hours later since that interview, you understand a little bit more of the positivity, or at least I do, just because I've seen more results. And for you to have faith in him without the results is certainly something too. And there's a lot of people that have had tons of faith in Damar in this scenario. And his ability to come through, and it looks like he's taking steps toward that. So really tremendous. But let's hear a little bit from Rodney Thomas in the locker room right now as we spoke with him this week about his drive to Cincinnati, his time with the Hamlin family, and seeing his old friend.
It was good to just go in there and just see him, see the family, and just be with them at that point in time. Because I know it's real tough for them. As well as it is for the people that are real close to him, different things like that. So just trying to be there. He's a soldier, and he went down, and he needed troops behind him. So I was close, made my way over there.
That was Colts rookie safety Rodney Thomas speaking about his trip to Cincinnati to see Damar Hamlin, his old friend, there after the really scary events from Monday Night Football. So again, all our best to Hamlin and the family. And next up, I guess you have to decide what to do, Chap. Once you get past the human element of it, there's still a football season and a battle for the number one seed in the AFC. Whatever the NFL decides to do, it's going to be a little messy. Whether they try to play that game, finish it out between the Bengals and the Bills, it's probably not likely that would happen, I would say. It's probably more likely to be canceled, but and to keep all the other schedules on tap, and then you'll kind of deal with the number 1 seed anyway. But that's that. I guess that's what's next for the NFL, and thankfully, since Damar is feeling better and looking better, you expect Week 18 to go on as normal. I know there were initial thoughts that, oh shoot, are players going to be able to play Week 18 because of what has happened, especially players on the Bills with being teammates of his. But now, like I said, it comes the idea of what could happen next. And from my perspective, it just seems like canceling that game would be the one that ruffles the fewest amount of feathers, because there's going to be some kind of ruffling of feathers no matter what happens, right?
Yeah, and I keep waiting for the league to announce something, and people need to realize we're not being cold and callous with this, but the game when the league goes on, because it has to. And I firmly believe that, as maybe not Monday night, but Tuesday morning, they were in discussions, because you have to be. That's why they've got a zillion people working at the league office. Is this portion works with this, and this portion works with this. And that doesn't mean that the portion that's working on what to do at the game doesn't care about the player, but you have to figure out what you're doing. But like you said, I just don't see how they have, okay, we're going to extend the postseason. We're going to get rid of the bye between the championship game and the Super Bowl, move everything back, and have the Bengals and Bills play, next week. That's not going to happen. Probably, like you said, canceling the game. But I've seen rumor, speculation that maybe they expand the playoffs to include a team that might get messed up because of not having, whether. And I have not looked at the schedule on the playoffs enough, because the team we follow has been out since, I don't know, October, it feels like. But maybe you expand it to 8 teams so that team gets in. But then you're going to have issue with the seeding, because without playing that game, there's going to be an issue with the seeding. And I think what you said is totally accurate. Somebody's going to get you use ruffled feathers, so we'll go there.
That was the nicest way I could think about it.
But somebody will, and you know what you have to say is, sorry, but that's how it is. Stuff happens. So, but here we are Thursday, and keep in mind, the Bills have to play this weekend. What kind of shape are they in mentally to go out there and play? It's one thing and what we got from the Colts on Wednesday was emotional and heartfelt, and these guys felt the situation of a player almost dying on the field and still being in critical condition and all that. That's one thing. It's awful, and it's on your mind, but then you go play Houston. It's totally different when you're the Buffalo Bills. That's your guy. I'm sure they'll go out and play. Who do they play? The Patriots, right? I think it is. That's a massive game. It's a massive game. So it's one thing where you still have to care about Hamlin, but the league still has to figure out what to do. I mean, you can do both. Again, I'm sure you can simply do both and not do shame to the other. I'm curious because, as you said, somebody's going to come out with the short end of something, but it's one of these, 1 in a 50-year of occurrence that you're going to have to deal with. And I really don't think the team that gets short shrift is going to have a lot. They're not going to have a strong voice of opposition to it, because sometimes stuff happens.
I read one possibility, Joe, would even be to make the AFC Championship game something like a neutral site game if it comes down to it, if you have to mess around with the 1 seed. And I was thinking then, I mean, if you're Chiefs-Bills and you're looking for a neutral site game somewhere between them, Indianapolis is right there. Like, I really think, honestly, if they did that, like Indianapolis or Detroit for Ford Field would be the two they would pick, because they're indoors, they're between them.
Detroit might be busy.
Yeah.
they might be playing.
Exactly. Detroit could still be out there. So you got to get someone who's out of the playoffs. So, Joe, playoff football coming to Indianapolis. You heard it here first on the Colts Blue Zone podcast.
Yeah, and within the past few years, everything that's happened with the pandemic, it's almost like we're used to unprecedented situations.
We are.
What's another one in terms of rescheduling this game, canceling it, giving both teams a tie? I've seen that floated out there. So I'll be interested to see what they do with this. I don't really have a strong opinion on what they should do. I haven't heard anyone really say this makes the most sense because no matter what way you slice it, someone's going to get the raw end of the deal, or at least think they do. Maybe that's how it would have ended up anyway.
Right.
Since we don't know the results of that game, but it's aside from Hamlin, which is a terrible situation, what the NFL does with the scheduling will be very interesting.
So we'll see what happens. We will see. We will also see if any Colts are elected to the newest class of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The 15 modern era finalists have been announced per Mike Chappell and all the voters, whittling the field down. We have 2 Colts on this list of 15. They are Reggie Wayne, his 4th year of eligibility, is a finalist again, and Dwight Freeney, a finalist for the Hall of Fame. So from this list, if you've been following along from the semifinalist stage, you know that Robert Mathis did not make this cut. So Chappell, we'll start with Rob and then kind of move on to the 15 modern era finalists. But we had kind of speculated that the national view of Mathis and Freeney might skew slightly toward Freeney, and this would be a little bit of confirmation toward our estimate, wouldn't it?
And that's too bad for Robert. It's crazy, but when you talk to folks around here, and again, I tried to get the late John Turling, to say, hey, if you could have one, Freeney or Mathis, who would you take? And he said, no, I'm not going there. You're not getting me to do that. But I do think that locally, and this is just my gut feeling, locally, it's Mathis, and nationally, it's Freeney. It's just a feeling I get from that, and it's hard to really say which one is right and which one's wrong. I mean, it's crazy. People forget that Mathis is the Colts' all-time sack leader. It's not Freeney, because Dwight left here and went elsewhere, and Robert's got the all-time record for sack strips, fumbles, and then Freeney's got more sacks because he played longer and he went to an extra Super Bowl that he should have won but didn't because,
28-3.
Because of Tom Brady.
Yep.
And because of Atlanta's offense. Really interesting. Do I think Freeney gets in first ballot? Probably not. I think DeMarcus Ware gets in from this group. Should have got in last year as a first ballot guy. But I think it's funny when I've seen some guys, selectors have put out like, okay, this is a 15. Which 5 do you like? And they're just asking for comments. And I'm telling you, 80% of the comments had Freeney on the list, which surprised me. But I think, again, that just shows that the national image, optics, is Freeney. And he was that good, and he had this spin move. And, it's funny, if you had that signature move and you were pretty good and you came from Syracuse.
That's right.
But I just think that the deck is stacked against him this year because of DeMarcus Ware. But there is a national perception that Freeney was damn good, and he was. So be very curious to see how he does.
I still remember, Joe, this was even before I went to Syracuse, so it was when Freeney was drafted, just a couple years before I went. Like seeing him coming out and being drafted and thinking, at me as my young football fan, like, he's a small defensive end. I don't know if he's going to work well in the NFL. I mean, he's a top 15 pick, whatever. That's a lot of faith to put into this guy who doesn't really fit the mold. But Freeney was also kind of maybe somewhat of a changing of the guard in some ways in the NFL and how they view pass rushers. And he certainly came to the perfect place here in Indianapolis. That was eventually paired with Robert Mathis on one side, but also the turf that could just magnify his speed and his ability there. and also an offense that kept putting points on the board, so other offenses needed to match and needed to throw themselves. He was put in a perfect scenario to be successful, and he certainly took advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, everything kind of lined up for him in his career. I'm sure he would have had a great career.
I completely
anyway,
agree, yes.
But just the scheme that he was in with the offense putting up so much points, so he got to rush the passer more instead of having to run defend, which was not his strong suit, obviously. And then today we see so many more edge rushers in his mold, about 260 pounds. What was he, like 6'1", 6'2"? He wasn't all that tall, so he was able to get down and under those hulking offensive linemen. So he was a bit, in a way, a trendsetter in that regard. And then the Colts went and got an even smaller defensive end in Mathis, not in the first round, albeit.
Right.
But to pair with him, I think, I kind of agree with what Mike describes as a national view. I always saw Freeney as like the guy, and then Mathis as kind of his running mate. And then once Freeney moved on, Mathis kind of like established himself as a guy in his own right and goes, I'm not just a sidekick. I'm not just a Robin to your Batman. So I think it is kind of unfortunate that the narrative plays out that way for Mathis. But that's kind of, just growing up and watching this team, that's kind of how I felt about it as well.
And that brings us to Reggie Wayne, the other Colt that is a finalist, 4 years eligible for the Hall of Fame, chap for Reggie Wayne. And I know you've made the argument for him before in front of the selection committee. You'll get the chance to do it again. Heck, you had to do it for Edgerrin 6 or 7 years, whatever it was. And there comes a point where there's not too much more you can add to the discussion. But when you look at who gets in, I mean, you always compare them against other players who are on the list and other players who are at the same position specifically. And you have Reggie Wayne, you have Torrey Holt, you have Andre Johnson. They're the 3 wide receivers. And I know we've certainly talked on this podcast about those 3 before and how they fit. But if Reggie's going to go in, I think those 2 guys are really his main competition. Obviously, it's everybody in this 15, but in order to be considered most probably, you have to be viewed as the best at your position, and then after that, it's kind of a pick and choose between positions. So this is another opportunity for Reggie to get in. How do you feel about his chances in this vote when it comes down to it in February?
I felt better last year because of the group, and that does matter, is who else is in the group. I don't think this is the problem with this year's group is there might be 3 first ballot guys. Well, 2 first ballots, and I think DeMarcus Ware gets in. I think there's a good chance Darrelle Revis gets in, and Joe Thomas. Which will be kind of crazy where a guy who played on such a crappy team for so long, but it just shows that you can be a great, great player on a bad team. With Reggie and Holt and Johnson, it's just what's your flavor, because their stats are so similar. They are. I think one of those guys gets in because the Hall of Fame, the 49 selectors, is we know that we've already now created another backlog at the position. And before long, we're going to have Larry Fitzgerald. We're going to have Jason Witten, who's a tight end, but he's still a receiver, sort of. So then all of a sudden, you're really, really getting a backlog of players. And I saw Mike Sando of The Athletic did a really, really good study. And I won't get into all the complicated stats he had about ranking receivers, over the last 50 years. And it involved, how many years you led the league in this and that and average and all this. Jerry Rice was number 1. Jerry Rice is a freak.
Obviously.
He's an alien. I think he is. But Reggie was number 10 all time. The problem is Torrey Holt was 3. So, and that's based, I think, on yards per catch and his per year. His numbers in those are just a smidgen better than Reggie. And on top of that, Torrey Holt's been waiting like 8 years to Reggie's 4. So one of these guys gets in, and I'm telling you, I may stand up and cuss in the room if Andre Johnson gets in before either one of these guys gets in. It's just not right. No, Calvin Johnson, okay, I understand 2 years ago that he got in, or last year he got in. I understand it. He was almost an alien, like Jerry Rice. But Andre Johnson is he's so similar. So, but one of these guys gets in because they need to, and hopefully, again, I joke with Edger and I joke with Reggie again this year. I wish last year Reggie could have snuck in another 1,000 yards on his resume, another 5 touchdowns. But like you said, it's the same numbers. Nothing changes. You just have to wonder what it's going to take nationally. And this is another one, like with Freeney Mathis. A lot of what works against Reggie is the national perception. Well, you had Peyton and Andrew Luck. And Andre Johnson had Matt Schaub. So I think that works against him a little bit. But people need to see that when Marvin no longer was the number one guy, like that was in 2007, I think it was, and Reggie took off. Reggie had 3 or 4 of his best years. He showed he was the guy. So it's interesting, and I'm sure I'll get upset. I hope I don't. Reggie, as he told us today, if he ever gets in, he'll have, what do you call it, a big-ass party.
Yep.
I believe was his quote. It'll rival Edgerrin's.
Good luck with that.
Which was a bit bigger than Peyton's, which you could expect. But deserving. I think most of these guys, there's a couple of these guys I'm not, super hyped on, but there's a handful I am. Reggie's one I am. Dwight's one I am. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah, there's a lot of great players, Joe, in this 15 player class. Along with Reggie and Dwight Freeney, you have, as Chap mentioned, Darrelle Revis, one of the best cornerbacks easily of his era. Joe Thomas, easily one of the best offensive tackles of his era. Willie Anderson, the offensive tackle. You have Torrey Holt. You have Devin Hester, who is arguably the greatest return man of all time in the NFL. Andre Johnson, who was mentioned, along with DeMarcus Ware, Jared Allen, who's also in that line, a defensive end, who's been waiting for a couple years. Then at linebacker, you have Zach Thomas and Patrick Willis. At safety, Darren Woodson, and a pair of cornerbacks or defensive backs in Rondé Barber and Albert Lewis. So there's a lot of great names on this list, but obviously Colts fans are hoping that a couple more can make that final cut. I would not be surprised if neither of them make it in the final here. Like Chap was saying, like last year was a weak class. It really was, and there were some decisions made by the full selection committee. I'm not putting this completely on you, obviously, Chap, but to have a guy like Sam Mills make it in his just final year of eligibility, because it was his final year of eligibility, throw him in there instead of giving it to someone else who's perhaps you would think more deserving of the Hall of Fame. This year there's a little bit more elite talent, I think, at the top of this list. When you look at Revis and Thomas, and then when DeMarcus Ware didn't make it last year was stunning to me. Anyway, I thought if there was anyone.
And that's that's a byproduct of Sam Mills getting in. I mean,
right.
I'm not ripping on Sam Mills, but when you get him in and you leave off DeMarcus Ware, it carries over to the next year.
Right.
So there are repercussions of your decisions.
So Joe, look at this list, and who do you like on this list, whether it's Colts or otherwise, as kind of some of your favorites?
Yeah, obviously I'm rooting for Reggie and or
Joe would put them
Freeney.
both 1 and 2.
Put them both in.
Let's go.
But if I'm, take my Colts fandom aside and completely look at it objectively, I go Revis Thomas, DeMarcus Ware, Patrick Willis, those 4, and then it'd be a real tough choice on who the number 5 is. Probably Torrey Holt, just because he's right there with the other receivers and he's been waiting longer. I feel like it's his turn. I mean, back in the day, Holt was right up there with Moss and Harrison and Terrell Owens. It's like kind of those top 4 stud wide receiver guys who would just terrorize opposing defenses. And so that would be my 5 if I was to, have sole control of the Hall of Fame, putting my, love of the Colts on the back burner.
Of course. They're out of one stat that I thought that was really remarkable with Torrey Holt was he has an NFL record of 6 straight seasons of 1,300 receiving yards or more. Like not even Jerry Rice had 6 straight seasons of 1,300 yards or more. That is remarkable, elite consistency and production. And obviously, the Rams were incredible offense at that time.
Yeah, I wonder why he's kind of a forgotten wide receiver from that era. I don't know if it's just because there was, like I listed off, so many other great wide receivers as well. He wasn't necessarily a guy who brought a lot of attention to himself.
Marshall Faulk was kind of the star on that team. So he was the one that I think just got most of that attention. And Kurt Warner as well from his years. I think Mark Bolger might have even been for one or two of those years, the Torrey Holt of 1300. But you look at who the stars were specifically, and I think Marshall kind of stole a little bit of the attention. And maybe that's why Torrey Holt doesn't get the same respect right now. And he also was done after 10 or 11 years, so he had a shorter career. He didn't have those years when he was still playing in the NFL where, like, Reggie did have a couple of them where he seemed to be like a veteran, revered player where you can tell that he was kind of on the down slope of his career. But still during those times, like, you're still in the spotlight. You can still like show up on broadcast and be talked about glowingly by whoever's doing the games for several years while you're going through that time in your career. Torrey Holt never got that. He reached a point and he was done. And he wasn't the type of player like Calvin Johnson who reached that point and was done and was obviously, like Chap said, an alien type of guy that was going to be in the Hall of Fame. So that's my random theory Dave's random theory of the day for terms of just respect for these players. I think Devin Hester has to be in the Hall of Fame because he is the best at his position in NFL history. It's when Adam Vinatieri finally becomes eligible. He has got to be in the Hall of Fame because he is the best at his position in NFL history. Right, Chap? Am I wrong?
Adam Vinatieri, I hope I'm still doing this, I think in 2 years when Vinny is up for it. I firmly believe he's the guy you stand up and say, Adam Vinatieri, and you sit down. And I've been told by a couple of selectors, well, he was a kicker. And I'm thinking, are you out of your mind? And I'm probably going to do this, is I'm going to stand up and say, and I'll go through the stats, the most points ever, I think it's 4 Super Bowl wins, 2 that he kicked the winning play. He had the winning play. He has the all-time record for consecutive makes at 44, I believe it is, at age like 60, and he really started the Patriots dynasty with the kick and the tuck game, and if it was any other player at any other position, you say that's enough, but it's a kicker.
Also, holy meatballs, did you guys see the video he posted the other day of him working out with who I assume is his son?
He is jacked.
He is yoked.
Yeah,
man.
dude.
He might be trying to come back as a linebacker or something.
True.
I think it's that elk meat or whatever it is that he eats.
It's something. Whatever it is, I need to get on that because he is absolutely shredded.
When he was young, he chased. It wasn't Herschel Walker that he chased down or something. It was on a kick return. I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it was like an older Herschel Walker that Adam Vinatieri chased down on a kick return. I don't know if he could run that. He definitely couldn't run that fast anymore. But now it'd be like he tried to just stand there and like let Herschel run into him.
His biceps are bigger than his head at this point.
Oh my goodness, it's crazy.
Maybe
No,
he'll become a bodybuilder.
Again, his career unfortunately ended the way it ended in 19, where his last kick was totally you don't want to go out that way,
right?
With the way it ended, but my goodness, he kicked forever, most point, all that stuff. I just hope it's not that stigma like you mentioned with Devin Hester. There is that stigma. Well, he was special teams. It took the senior vote to get the best punter in, Ray Guy. And I kept arguing. I said, I don't care who the best kicker is. I don't care if it's Hunter Smith. I don't care if it's Pat McAfee. The best punter has got to be in the Hall of Fame because every year we vote another guard, another center, another defensive tackle. Now you're hearing Justin Tucker, and a great kicker. But what Vinatieri did, and again, there's probably 6 or 7 percentage points in their success rate. I think Vinny's about 83, maybe. Maybe he's 85. Justin Tucker's like 90, whatever. But Vinny's got, when it came to kicking the kick, It was Vinny. So I hope there's not much discussion, and if there is, it's because people are hung up on this. Yeah, but he's a kicker. Well, then that's just wrong.
I was told that scoring points was important in the NFL.
And every time the kicker goes on the field, unless it's a kickoff, there are points on the line.
At that point, just take special teams out of the game. Just start every drive at the 25. No more field goals. Either score a touchdown or you don't. It's a huge part of the game. The Bears don't make the Super Bowl that year without Devin Hester.
Mike, you take field goals away, and do the Colts score?
Not this year.
Nope. They do not. Not really. Yikes. Ouch. It's painful. But it's true. But it is true.
But it's about over.
What does Hancock Health's membership in the Mayo Clinic Care Network mean for you? It means our independent health network now has access to the knowledge and resources of the world leader in medicine. It means your Hancock Health doctor can now consult with Mayo Clinic specialists to confirm a diagnosis or treatment plan. And it means that together, we're making health possible for you. Learn more about our new clinical collaboration at hancockregional.org/Mayo Clinic. The Colts host the Texans this weekend to close out the 2022 NFL season, even though we are in 2023, of course, right now.
Usually I'm sad when the season's over, but this is not the case.
Joe reached sadness a long time ago. That's the problem. You've hit the apathy stage. And I think there's a lot of Colts fans out there who have. So we do appreciate you continuing to listen and download the Colts Blue Zone podcast and following us online on Twitter at Colts Blue Zone, because hopefully we provide a little bit of entertainment, a little bit more knowledge than just your typical game day, stat stuff and previewing, because obviously we're focusing elsewhere right now on how this Colts team lines up. But for those of you who are interested, Kenny Moore will not play in this game. He's been placed on injured reserve finally with his ankle. Like we talked about this last week. Like, why is Kenny Moore not on injured reserve? And I don't know if there's a specific reason, but
why is Kenny Moore not on injured reserve? Why is Nick Foles not on injured reserve?
Yeah,
the Colts might be down their top 4 cornerbacks, and you're going to keep a roster spot for Nick Foles?
Yeah, I don't know how it works or the machinations behind it, Chap.
Well, the only thing, and you're right, Joe. The only thing is though, is when you're allowed to bring a couple of practice squad players up for the game, then it's not as dire as what you would think it would be. So they can bring a couple of defensive backs up at the end of the week, and it's the same as having them on the active roster, which they'll be for game day.
Gotcha.
A couple players who did not participate in Wednesday's practice also, besides Kenny Moore and Nick Foles, include Brandon Faison, who had a concussion. Stephon Gilmore has a wrist injury. Kylan Granson with an ankle injury. Rodney McLeod was just resting. And defensive end Rashad Berry, who was just signed to the list, was a travel day for him, getting him in town and getting him up to speed, sort of. And full participant in practice was wide receiver Ashton Doolin, coming off of his concussion. So some optimism that he will be ready to go come Sunday against the Texans, who have ruled out cornerback Derek Stingley Jr. He's on injured reserve. Damian Pierce, their running back, is on injured reserve. Justin Britt's on injured reserve. Nico Collins, the wide receiver, on injured reserve. Did not participate in Wednesday's practice. Cornerback Steven Nelson with an illness. Center Jimmy Morsley. I don't know if that's spelled right. I'm having a tough time pronouncing it, but with a concussion. Thank you, Joe. Morsley, like the L and the S, you would think, or something, are in weird position. You're probably right. I can't tell you the ins and the outs of the Houston Texans 53-man roster. Also a full participant in Wednesday's practice, Tegan Quitoriano with a thigh injury. So that's the quick injury report from both squads. Is that spelled correctly, Joe? Have you found out? Morsley. M-O.
No, apparently the L is an I, so Morrissey.
Oh, Morrissey. Okay.
Yes.
So,
I guess on the Texans' websites, the L's and the I's are
they looked a little
confused.
similar. Okay,
yes.
okay. I was very confused there, as you could all tell just listening here. Like, I look at it like, that's not how you spell a name. So anyway,
that's not a name.
No, the Colts are 4-11-1. The Texans are 2-13-1. And one remarkable thing that I found about the Texans this year, guys, is if they go outside the AFC South, they lost every single game. Every game that they had against a non-AFC South opponent, they lost. And so far, they have beaten the Jaguars once, they've beaten the Titans once, and they tied the Colts. So there you go. The Colts should be the AFC South champions, right? Because they had the best result against the Houston Texans so far. Out of well, that would mean that they would need to. Well, it doesn't matter even if they lose this game because, or if they win this game. Either way, they still have the best record against the Houston Texans out of everyone in the division. So there you go. The Colts are AFC South champions. You heard it here first on the Colts Blue Zone podcast. But in all seriousness, but before we get into some of the numbers with these teams, we were talking about it, guys, before we got on this podcast. This is a unique scenario. Well, it's a unique scenario in the fact that you don't see it every week, but perhaps you see it once every year or every other year. That there are two teams that are completely like in the top 5 of the draft order that are playing each other down the stretch of the season. That really, you heard the expression, you have a lot to play for. Well, they have a lot to lose for this weekend, both teams, because the Texans, Chap, are in a heated battle with the Chicago Bears for the top overall draft pick. And if they don't get it, then the Bears are number 1. And although the Bears aren't going to take a quarterback like the Texans would like, the Bears can trade with anybody who wants a quarterback there then in that number 1 spot.
Auction. It
really would be. And they'll probably get a king's ransom if there's one quarterback. And right now it seems like Bryce Young is the guy who's head and shoulders above everyone else, who still appears a couple other good quarterbacks there in the first round. So the Texans losing out on that first draft pick could be very significant for them in the future of that franchise. And for the Colts, I mean, geez, you still want to get up as high as possible, whether it's going to be as high as 3 or as low as number 6. There's a big swing in there in terms of what you can draft or what you can trade for in terms of franchise-changing caliber players, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's why I thought all along, depending, the Colts are going to end up with the 3rd best quarterback, maybe the 2nd best if they can get just a smidge higher. And I guess I wouldn't rule out a trade with Chicago. It's funny. I saw our friends at the Star had an interesting what-if thing with trading with the Bears. I don't know what the draft picks they were going to send, but they were going to send DeForest Buckner and Kenny Moore back to Eberflus to try to get their pick and then take your, the 2nd best quarterback. Which the only issue is, I guess. An argument that can be made is, and the Colts did this way back when, is yes, you've got to get your guy. You have absolutely got to get your guy, but don't gut your roster to do it. Remember, that's what they did with Jeff George in 1990, and maybe that never would have worked anyway, but they gave up Andre Rison, their top receiver, young receiver, and they gave up Chris Hinton, their left tackle, and then the offense was bad. Oh, really? But we were talking with Reggie Wayne today, and he's always fun to talk with. But he mentioned whether, we asked him about what needed to be fixed or whatever, and he wasn't going to go where we wanted him to go because he'd probably get fired. I don't know. But he said it was important to get the guy. And I think, I'm pretty sure we agreed he was talking about the coach. Got to make sure you get the right coach. But I said all along, too, I sort of really, really believe it. If you don't get the right quarterback, I don't care who your coach is. I mean, I really do. So they've got to do almost whatever they have to do short of getting your roster to get the quarterback. Because if nothing else, and I think Joe and I talked a little bit about it, is right now the fan base is PO'd. They're really upset with where this is. But if you give them a quarterback that they can believe in the draft, they will they'll endure another bad season next year because they know that maybe probably they've got their quarterback. So we've always joked that we need to get this season over so they can start the rebuild process, and that starts with who loses perhaps on Sunday.
Yeah, Joe, quite the significant weekend here for the Colts. I think for the first time in every week, I think there's been a good swath of Colts fans who've been hoping for them to lose every week. And I understand completely.
And they've been doing a great job.
They have been. They've been doing tremendous. To be fair, to be fair. So this week, even more so. Even if other some fans were still kind of holding out I still want to see them do well. I still want to see them win. This week, maybe more than most, could pull some over to the dark side, so to speak, as the season comes to an end.
Yeah, I remember I had, in my friend group, people rooting for Tank since the Broncos game, which was a little early for me. I wasn't quite there yet.
They believed from early on that this was coming, and they were right.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't too long ago that we were talking about the Colts having this abysmal season. There's the word abysmal again, but yet still having the 14th pick in the draft, and they've just marched their way up and up and up and up that draft order. The worst they can finish is 6. If the Colts win and the Rams lose to the Seahawks, which I think they will. Seahawks have a playoff spot to play for. Then the Colts fall back to 6. They could potentially get up. I think 4 is most likely. I think if the Broncos beat the Chargers, who may or may not have something to play for, by the time the 4 o'clock games hit, a lot will be decided during the 1 o'clock games. Then the Colts could have the 4th pick if they lose and the Broncos find a way to win. So, there's not a ton of fluctuation that could happen at this point. But when it comes down to draft time and making a potential trade to move up if you have to, or just sticking and picking, the 4th pick versus the 6th pick is going to be a big deal.
No doubt. Chap.
Just for perspective and context, you got these two teams going absolutely nowhere. Well, this is reminiscent. Someone reminded me of it last night. This is reminiscent of the 1991 season finale. It was called the Reapus Bowl. That's Super Bowl spelled backwards. and it was the 1-14 Colts at the 2-13 Tampa Bay Bucks. And the Colts got the first pick, and it was, I believe, Steve Entman. So there
didn't
is
work out
precedent.
so well.
So, I know. Well, that's the story for another day. but there is precedent for 2 crappy teams playing in the last game of the season.
There is. There certainly is. And here we are yet again. And we'll get into this certainly much more later, but it's more important to pick the right quarterback and have the right coach than to have the higher pick for quarterback or even the first pick for coach, whatever it might be. I mean, you look back. I always just look back to the 2018 season a couple years ago when Josh Allen was the 3rd quarterback taken. He was taken 7th overall. The Colts can only pick as low as 6th, as you said, Joe. So if they were like in that year, like they could have taken a guy like a Josh Allen. So if the right guy falls to you and you have the right coaching, which the Bills absolutely did, that's been proven right. People forget going into that draft that there were a lot of people who did not like Josh Allen at all. And Josh Rosen, they thought Josh Rosen was the better Josh. Like he wasn't even the best Josh at quarterback, according to 30% maybe of the prognosticators or the pundits out there. So when we get to that discussion, we'll get to it. But for now, certainly the higher you get, the more chance you have of getting the guy that you want and getting the guy that you want to be coached. Right, Mike?
Yeah, and the higher you can get in the draft order, to some degree, the less you're going to have to fork over to get even higher. Because I don't think we should rule out at all the Colts moving up from wherever they are, 6-5-4, to get a smidgen higher, because the less you have to move up, the less you have to pay, even though whatever you move up is going to cost you a bunch.
Yep. Just don't be like the Jets that year who traded up for Sam Darnold when they could have gotten Josh Allen whenever they so wanted to. Well, with the Colts, who traded down to number 6 and got Quentin Nelson that year. So anyway, Colts and Texans. Let's break down this intriguing matchup, shall we? The Texans have the worst record in the NFL. They're coming off a 31-3 loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Houston offense is anemic at best. 31st in the league in scoring, 16.1 points per game, which is still better than the Baltimore Ravens do without Lamar Jackson at quarterback, but that's another story for another time. They've scored 1 fewer point than the Colts have this season. So there you go. That's a great, these teams are tied, Joe. They really are. You look at week 1, 20-20, and you look at all the way down here to week 18. Just 1 point separates these two splendiferous offenses.
Yeah, and we'll get to it in predictions, but the spread kind of shows that it's probably going to be a pretty close game. Although I said that last week about the Colts-Giants game, that did not turn out to be the case.
So much for that. They are 32nd in yards, dead last in the NFL, 25th in passing, 31st in rushing. They only average 3.8 yards per carry, which is second worst in the league. They're right in the middle in sacks. They're 14th. And second to last in the NFL in turnovers. They've turned over the ball 25 times, so it'd be nice to get a couple more of those. If you're rooting for the Colts to do well.
Two turnover kings in this game.
There you go.
Colts with the most turnovers, and then Texans with the second most.
There we go.
So there might be a lot of balls changing hands.
But then the ball's going to be on the ground, and it's going to be like, do you want it? No. Do you want it? Because you're going to want to lose this game, right? No, not for the players, but it'll be maybe some folks in the stands. Don't dive on it. Stay away from the ball. Let's see what happens after that. The Houston defense is not much better than the offense. They are 26th in points allowed and 30th in yards allowed. 12th against the pass, dead last against the run, but this is not a Colts team that has proven to be very good in the running game under Jeff Saturday in general, and without Jonathan Taylor in particular. That certainly plays a big role in what they've been able to do in recent weeks especially. But they are 6th in takeaways with 24 this year, so the Texans defense can, as it has proven to, take the ball away better than the average team in the NFL this year. It's just that when they don't take the ball away, teams tend to score on them quite a bit more often than not. Joe, how about some players to watch as the Colts and Texans suit up this weekend from the opposing side?
Short list this week, and a lot of that is there were some significant players on IR for the Texans. But Davis Mills,
as I mentioned last week, your lists are getting shorter and shorter.
It was a really front-sided show this week.
It was.
But yeah, you got to start with the quarterback, Davis Mills, starting for this team again the last few weeks after I believe there's 1 week that he was benched, but 61% completions, 200 yards per game, 14 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. There's a reason why the Texans are in the quarterback market after 2 years of Davis Mills. Last few games, he's been a little better. 4 total touchdowns to 1 interception. Had a career-high 33 rushing yards last week.
Hey, there you go.
Daniel Jones really torched the Colts on the ground, so you got to watch out for that with Davis Mills.
You heard it here first on the Colts Blue Zone podcast that Daniel Jones was going to have some very important runs, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, I mean, in week 1 versus the Colts, Mills actually had a pretty good game. 240 yards passing, 2 tuds, 0 interceptions. That was a game when O.J. Howard was unguardable. And he's kind of fizzled out as the season went along.
He was unguarded. There's a difference in those words.
Thank you for the correction, Mike. I completely agree. Looking at Brandon Cooks, I mean, this is one of the few, I guess you could call stars on this team.
Especially with Dameon Pierce out, right?
Yeah, Dameon Pierce is moving forward, he's a running back that I'm going to be concerned with as a Colts fan. But with Brandon Cooks, he had his best game of the year against the Colts in week 1. 7 catches for 82 yards. Those were both season highs. He's only topped 60 yards in 3 games this season. Just a hair under 600 yards on the year. So really not having the season he'd like to. There's a reason he was trying to get out of Houston around the trade deadline, and that did not happen for him. But he's still someone that the Colts are going to have to keep an eye on. Looking at the defense, I mean, if you watch that week 1 game, the Colts are going to have to account for Jerry Hughes. 2 sacks, an interception, and a forced fumble in that game. He's got 9 sacks on the season, so really a nice revival to a career that seemed to be winding down.
1 more sack would be 10. I think that would either tie or be his career high in the career of Jerry Hughes.
Which is fantastic for a player who I believe is 33 or 34.
Yep.
He's up there. And then you want to talk about young, talented rookies. Jalen, I believe, Petrie?
I think so.
Out of Baylor, second-round pick, 37th overall. He leads the team in interceptions with 5 and total tackles with 139. He had 10 in week 1 against the Colts. I believe he was the one who delivered the shot on Pierce that knocked him out with the concussion and kind of altered his face mask. So he's somebody who can hit you over the middle and take the ball away. He's got an interception in each of his last 2 games, so he's a playmaker out there for this Houston defense.
But like Mike said earlier, just the list of playmakers is small, and it just you get sometimes weird players who step up, like O.J. Howard was week 1 to be a playmaker against bad defenses or teams that are just trying to come together or struggling in certain areas. So So that's where the Colts are going up against this group of Houston Texans. Joe, your keys. Chap has something before Joe's keys to the game. So what you got?
Yeah, one thing on players to watch favorably with the Colts. Michael Pittman Jr. needs 4 catches for 100, and it's funny how Reggie Williams said, "Yeah, but I'm more concerned about him getting 1,000 yards." And I think he needs 105 catches. I don't know. So at that rate, he's going to need about 15 catches for, averaging 7 yards. And on top of that, Zaire Franklin needs 5 tackles to break Shaq Leonard's franchise record of 163, which, yes, is an extra game and all that, and tackles are tackles, but a franchise record's a franchise record.
I'm sure Shaquille Leonard will have nothing but good things to say about. He will have good things to say about Zaire, but then he will certainly not be motivated at all next year to do anything by himself to get that record back. So perhaps that'll be a good thing for Shaquille Leonard. Give him something else to motivate him to get back, as if he needs any extra motivation. But nevertheless,
that'll be one of about 20 motivational tools he'll use next year.
Yeah, talking about tackles, Colts have 2 top 10 tacklers with Okereke and Franklin, only team in the NFL with 2 top 10 tacklers. So they got good linebacker set if you're looking for bright spots on this team.
And next year with Shaq coming back, one linebacker too many for the spots that you usually play. So if you're looking to move up in the draft, well, I guess Bobby would be a free agent. Yeah, exactly. So he'd be someone that you'd have to re-sign or something before the draft and then trade him away, which would be, I think, unlikely to do it in that case. Anyway, I ramble because we have to get to the keys to the game, Joe. By some miracle, we've made it to 55 minutes here in this Colts Blue Zone podcast. We had a lot to talk about early. We really did before we got to the game. But your keys to the game, I know this is going to be some lengthy discussion here, so stick with us. Joe, how about you begin your keys to the game? Go right ahead.
One word: lose. Just lose. The Colts have been very good at this year. They've lost almost all their games. And if they lose just one more game, they will guarantee themselves at least a 5th overall draft pick in which they could hopefully draft a new franchise quarterback and reset a more successful era in the Indianapolis franchise. So please, just lose.
Just lose and get to the future. That's what a lot of people have thought for a lot of time.
The story of Hancock Health is all about you and everything you need to live your healthiest life. Like Hancock Regional, one of the nation's safest hospitals, and an independent health network with over 70 doctors at more than 30 locations around East Central Indiana. We're growing and evolving to help further your story. And we're just getting started. See all the ways Hancock Health and you can work together to make health possible at hancockhealth.org.
And with one game left in the regular season, which you can watch on CBS 4, by the way, at 1 o'clock this weekend if you're in central Indiana. That's kind of been a forefront on folks' minds. FanDuel has the Colts at 2.5-point favorites, over-under set at 38.5. So we're expecting a rousing 20-18 ball game at Lucas Oil Stadium, which seems a little high for me. Just because we haven't even talked that Sam Ehlinger is your starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. Yeah, there's that too. That's another change.
That tells you where we are in the season.
The crazy thing, and we were talking to him in the locker room, and he went through his progression this year and how he's been. He said, "I was third, then second, then first, then back to second, then third, now second, now first." Like he went through the whole roller coaster of his season, dealing with where he's supposed to be. And for him, as a second-year guy, who's a 6th-round pick or a 4th round or a 6th round? He was down there somewhere. I think it was 6. Yeah, it was a 6th-round pick.
6th-round pick.
He's not supposed to be playing right now. He was supposed to. We talked to him at the beginning of the season about like his goals for the year and how he can progress as a player. And he gave us this really like good, well thought out plan that I'm sure he and others had put together for him. And that was just completely blown out of the window when he needed to play.
Wasn't it like a 2 or 3 year plan?
Yeah, exactly. And it's just completely shot because they threw him into action. And it was mandate. It was I don't know. It was required that somebody would start.
It was mandated by the owner.
There you go.
Just say it.
Chap can say that. It was mandated that Sam Ehlinger take over as starting quarterback. So anyway,
at least Colts can score a touchdown with Ellinger. You know, I hate to rag on Foles. I hope his ribs heal, but they could not get in the end zone with Nick Foles at quarterback.
We haven't talked about Kayvon Thibodeau either, and that whole thing. I don't think there's much more to say about that whole instance.
It's not a good look.
Somebody should have taken him out, and even if you were going to get thrown out of the game.
Yep, and you Chap tried to talk to some offensive linemen and Jeff Saturday about because Sat said that he was going to talk to some linemen about it, but they're keeping it in house, and that's probably because they would use some words that are in that discussion that are not suitable for podcasts or radio or television. So
can you imagine if somebody had done that to Peyton Manning? Jeff Saturday, Tarek Glenn, Adam Meadows, any of those guys would have taken the guy out. In baseball, if that happens, you hit the guy in the head. The next batter that comes to the plate, you drill him.
Yep.
So it was such, for a season that's gone south, it was such a bad optics of you not protecting. Like Jeff said, you protect your own. Well, they didn't. No one did. Not just the offensive line. The receivers, the tight end, the running back, somebody should have done something.
Yeah, the only thing I'll include in this discussion is, like, you can think that Kayvon Thibodeau is a horrible human being and just awful, and how could he do that? And I get it, but if you're a Colts fan and you're focusing on your guys, you should be more concerned about your guys and the fact that nothing happened. You can still think those things about Thibodeau, but what should really burn at you, what should really eat at you is nobody did anything in that scenario. They let Nick Foles writhe on the ground in pain and have Thibodeau right there next to him acting a fool and celebrating, and they did nothing about it. That should be your concern, not who Thibodeau is, not what he did. Your concern should be that nothing happened from any of your guys to do a single darn thing about it. So that's my thoughts on the matter. And with that, we finally get to predictions for the Colts Texans. We keep putting it off because we just don't want to give them. But nevertheless, I'll finally give mine. Like my week one prediction was 21-20 Texans, if you remember correctly, and it ended up being a 20-20 ball game. So this week I'm going to go 14-13 Texans to close out the season. The Colts lose, and they perhaps climb a little bit higher in the draft. So that's my thought, 14-13, another thrilling offensive slugfest. Joe, what do you have? And then Chappell wrap things up.
This one's really tough. In my mind, it's kind of 50-50. I guess just because I have such little faith in the Colts doing what I want them to do this year, I'm going to take the Colts to win this game 17-14. But it could really go either way. I'll have my Colts gear on, but I will be rooting for Houston on Sunday.
Chap, what you got?
I've got the under.
Yes.
38.5 seems awful high to me. Again, turnovers are such an issue, and I do think Ellinger will take care of the ball against his team. I think they're going to, again, run the ball a lot. I've got 16-10. And the way I'm doing my Colts, it's okay. I'm giving them one touchdown, and then how many field goals? So 16-10, and it'll be unsightly. And you hope that, games are normally 3 hours and 5 minutes. You hope this is 2 hours and like 53 minutes. Just get it over.
That last week was great. It was a 2-hour, 45-minute ball game. You never see that. So you 16-10 Colts, right, Mike, specifically?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to be specific on that. Well, that brings our thrilling show to its inevitable conclusion, and there will be plenty more to discuss in the offseason as we really ramp up all the bells and whistles that come with your typical NFL offseason for a team in the Colts position. But as I said earlier, we do appreciate you sticking with us throughout this year. We hope you've been entertained a little bit by my antics. And at the end of the day, I just hope that when it comes to where you look for your Colts content, we can be in the upper quartile of that top quartile of places that you go.
We almost didn't get it.
Ding, 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 ding.
Snuck it in at the end. So there we go. We appreciate you listening. I encourage you to subscribe, get us delivered to your podcast listening device as we are dropped. For Mike Chappell and Joe Hopkins, I'm Dave Griffiths. We'll see you next time on the Colts Blue Zone Podcast.